You ever read the Beatitudes? The opening lines of Jesus' famous sermon called the Sermon on the Mount. It's not necessarily a sermon, it's more of a collection of the main teachings that Jesus always taught. But it's called the Sermon on the Mount because it's been organized into that format in Matthew 5, 6, and 7. You ever read those first few verses? They're called the Beatitudes. Maybe you've heard them before. Blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are those who mourn. Blessed are the meek. They shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. That kind of stuff. If you haven't read it, go ahead right now. Just pause me and read the first few verses of Matthew 5. Do you notice what's not in there? You notice Jesus never said, blessed are those who believe exactly the right things. Blessed are those who stand for their rights no matter what. You notice how he didn't say that? What he said instead was, the people who God blesses, the people who are accepted by God, aren't just the people that have the right beliefs and stand up for the right things. They're also the people that are poor in spirit, the people that think, what do I have to offer God? Nothing. I bet God wouldn't even be thinking about me with life I've lived. That person is blessed by God, accepted by God. And not only are the people accepted by God that try to believe the right things and stand up for the right things, but also the people that mourn, the people that are stricken with grief because they've lost something or someone and they can't get it back. Those people are blessed and accepted by God. God's thinking about them. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. You know, the people that don't feel like they're right with God, the people that wish that they could be part of the party, part of the body of Christ, part of a relationship with God, but they feel too messed up and too broken and too far away to think of that as a possibility for them. Jesus said those people are blessed and accepted by God. I like to think of the Beatitudes less as a list of things that we're all supposed to try to do, and more as a list of people that Jesus unexpectedly blesses and accepts. The first time Jesus taught that message and opened with those Beatitudes, the list of blessings, the people that heard them were surprised. Some of them were offended. Because up until that point, everybody assumed that the people that God blesses are the people that have a great moral track record. They're good at obeying all the rules that the spiritual people say that you're supposed to do. They don't cuss, they don't go behind their parents' backs ever. They don't sleep around. They don't go get drunk, and they always have super good discipline and never do the wrong thing. That's what everybody thought was the person that God blessed. And then Jesus comes onto the scene and he's like, blessed are the poor in spirit, the people that they just feel like they're nothing to God. They don't have anything to offer to God. Blessed are the people who are meek and humble, not the ones who go around and say, I got it all together and everybody should pay attention to me and learn from me because you could really learn from somebody like me. No, Jesus said, blessed are the humble, blessed are the meek. Those are the people that are actually going to inherit the earth. Those are the people who have true spiritual power. Everybody's mind was blown. And I go back to that today because I mention it to you because I think we need to make room for those words in our hearts right now. Because while we argue about politics and we yell at each other and try to figure out whose fault this all is and how to punish them and and all that stuff. There's people in the world that are too hurt and broken down. They don't have time to go out and protest. They don't have energy or money to give to some fund somewhere. They're struggling just to put food in their kids' mouths. They're struggling to overcome addictions. They're struggling with homelessness. They need help. And Jesus thought that those type of people who don't feel like they have much to offer, who wish that they could be part of the party but can't, Jesus thought that those people were blessed, that those people belonged with him. Does the church think that? Do the people of God think that? Just want to bring that message. I think it's okay to protest. I think it's okay to voice your opinions and your thoughts about what's right and wrong in society. I think that's an important thing for us to be able to do. And we're able to live in a country where it's a democracy, and we do have some political power. We should use the power that we have. We should use the vote that we have. We should use the rights that we have. Man, but if we get too caught up in that world, we're going to get sucked into this never-ending game of deciding who's right and who's wrong, and we're going to forget about the people that Jesus said were really blessed and accepted. And if we're not careful, Jesus will be the only one who still blesses and accepts the poor in spirit, and those who mourn, those who are humble, those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, those who are peacemakers and bridge builders. Jesus shouldn't be the only one reaching out to them. He should have the help of his church. He should have the help of his disciples. So the challenge to talk about tonight is this. How can we escape all these arguments and shouting matches about who's right and who's wrong? And how can we as the church step into the space that the government will never be able to? You know what I mean? Government can't change people's hearts. Government can't love people. People love people. And Jesus changes hearts. How can we move in alongside the people that Jesus said are blessed? The people who are down and out, the poor in spirit, the people who wish they could be part of the party and don't feel like they can, the people who hunger and thirst for righteousness, to be right with God, the people who are mourning and hurting because life is beating them up, the people who are out there trying to be peacemakers and trying to bring people together, and nobody wants to listen, they just want to shout. How can we be part of something bigger than politics? That's what Jesus was, right? He was so much bigger than politics. I think of the time when he stood before Pontius Pilate, the Roman governing man that had the power to sentence him to death or to set him free. And Pilate told him, Jesus, I'm questioning you, and I know that what they said that you did, that's so horrible. I don't know why they're bringing you in here, but I don't think there's anything wrong with you. I don't see any reason to put you to death. And Jesus just stood there silent before him. And Pilate said, don't you understand? I have power over you. I decide whether you live or die. You have nothing to defend yourself and say for yourself. And Jesus said, I got a kingdom that you don't know anything about. And yeah, you decide whether or not to put me on a cross today, but you don't get to decide whether I live or die. Isn't that wild? Jesus thought bigger than politics. He knew that Pilate had the decision whether or not to crucify him, but he also knew that God had the decision whether or not to raise him from the dead. And he knew that he was building a kingdom that was so much bigger and greater, more expansive and inclusive, more powerful even than the Roman Empire. I want to be part of that kingdom. I want to close with this, because this is important. As we try to decide, what's the real problem in our society and who's to blame? Is it those selfish conservatives who don't care about the poor and they just blame the poor for not making better decisions? Or is it those crazy liberals, that they're always trying to get the government into everybody's business and they're always trying to make people give up their rights and stuff? Who's to blame for all these problems that we're having? As we argue about that, we should remember Jesus' words. You remember this? In Matthew 25, Jesus is talking about, what? Whatever you do for the people that are least powerful in society, you do for me. And whatever you don't do for the people that are least powerful in society, you don't do for me. If you so much as give a cold cup of water to somebody who's thirsty and in need of that you did that for me, Jesus said. If you visit somebody in prison that's lonely, you visited me, you cared about me, Jesus said. Well, Jesus, what if he deserves to be in there because he really committed a crime? Jesus doesn't say that. He said, if you visit somebody in prison, it's like you did that for me. If somebody needs clothes and you give it to them, that you did it for me. If somebody's hungry and you feed them, you're helping me, you're feeding me. There's a couple reasons that I highlight that. And the first one is there is something that we can do. Even though we're teenagers, I say we, I'm not a teenager, you're a teenager. Even though you're a teenager and you don't have a vote yet and you don't maybe have a car or a job or a lot of money, there is something you can do for Jesus because Jesus is in the face of every down and out person that you meet. Jesus is in the shoes of every person who is waking up this morning and wondering if they're going to be able to have 3 meals, if they're going to be able to send their kids to school, if they're going to be able to have shelter tonight. Jesus is all around us, just waiting to be served. And so that's the question. I know I got ideas. We've done service projects before. We've done mission trips before. But I kind of want this to come from you. Do you have any ideas? What can we do to serve the Jesus that's all around us and the people that are down and out? They're poor in spirit. They're mourning. They're trying to make peace and no one's listening. They're hungry and thirsty and they need clothes and they need somebody to visit them. They're sick and they're lonely. What can we do starting now? Because we got all the time in the world, right? The world has kind of stopped and we're phasing back in or whatever, but the fact is we all got lots of time. So what can we do to be Jesus, hands and feet, as some have said, of Jesus? And the other thing too that's interesting, I bring up Matthew 25 where Jesus says, whatever you do for the least of these, you do for me. Do you notice that? Jesus is putting himself and identifying himself with the poor and the incarcerated, with the down and out people, with the addicted people, the people on the lowest rung of the ladder of society. Jesus is identifying with them. He's saying, these are my people, and if you take care of them, you're taking care of me. He could have said that about the richest people, the most powerful people, but he didn't. He's trying to get us to see that if there's people, my neighbor's yelling. That was funny. He's trying to get us to see if there's somebody that Jesus can identify with, it's the poor person, it's the homeless person. Why is that? It's because when Jesus was here, the Bible says the Son of Man doesn't have anywhere to lay his head. Jesus was homeless. He just wandered around, and whoever gave him a place in their house, that's where he stayed that night. Jesus is in the face of the people who need the most. will we serve them? Will we reach out and experience Jesus that way? And how can we? How can we do that? Let's think of some ideas. Peace.